Hello, everybody. I'm Phil Brandt, President and CEO of AIM Employers Association, and welcome to This Week at Work.
This Week at Work is the only show about the workplace that offers you front row seats and a microphone, featuring experts in human resources and employment law to bring you practical, timely, and accurate insights so you can more effectively lead your organization. It's Thursday, September 19th, episode 296. Today, we have a powerful conversation lined up with Linea Johnson, founder of The Thrive Shift, a leading advocate for mental health in the workplace. Linea brings her expertise, lived experience, and a passion for creating inclusive work environments to our discussion. She'll help us explore how organizations can elevate their mental health support to the same level as their physical disability standards, and then continue rising the tide to lift everyone up, no matter what boat they're in. Plus, we'll discuss the delicate balance between support and performance, and when Lady Justice drops in to weigh the scales. All this and more on This Week at Work.
All right. Good morning, Bert. Welcome back. How are you today?
I'm doing well today, Phil. It's a beautiful day out there and excited for our guest speaker that we have here today.
Oh, I tell you what, you're going to like her, and I know our audience is as well. Linea Johnson, I got a chance to meet her just a few weeks ago. AIM works very closely with the SHRM organization throughout Illinois, and we had brought together a leadership conference, HR conference in Central Illinois, and she was our keynote leadoff speaker, and she did a fantastic job. She was courageous, and she talked about her experiences and her business and sharing with the audience on the topic of mental health. And I mean, I was memorized in her speech, and right away I was like, we have to get her on the program. And I feel really excited and quite lucky that she's here with us today. And I really look forward to our audience getting a chance to listen to her message, because it's ever so important in today's time. And coincidentally, September is National Suicide Prevention Month. So it just works out perfectly, Bert. That's just kind of how you and I are, right? We get these things and we mold them and they work out so well for us. But I just do want to remind everyone that if you are having difficulty in your personal or professional life, you're not alone and your life does matter. Help is available. There's no reason to tackle these difficulties on your own. Make sure to spread the word about the 988 suicide and crisis hotline number that is available for everyone in need. And Linea, I just want to say good morning to you and ask, is there anything you would even add about the 988 suicide prevention line?
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having me. It's such an important topic. 988 is a somewhat new line, which is very exciting. So you can call that specifically if you need support around thoughts of suicide or someone that you're worried about.
You know what I heard, and I don't know if you can expand on it or not, but I've heard that you can also text the line versus calling, which I think some people might be a little bit more comfortable with from the beginning. Do you know if that's true or not? And if not, that's okay.
I'm not sure. I do know that there are also a lot of other great services that you can text that are warm lines. So if you're maybe not in a crisis, you're able to chat with someone.
All right, perfect. All right, well, we are going to do things a little bit out of order here this morning. I am going to introduce the poll question first, and then we're going to skip lawyer on the clock, and we're going to dedicate the whole segment to this discussion on mental health. But Bert, I don't want you to get your feelings hurt by skipping your segment. What's that noise? What's that noise? Were you crying, Bert?
I have a sound.
Yeah, that was Nick playing a little, I think, disappointing noise in the background.
Well, I don't want you to be disappointed. Oh, our Nick is having a good time, I can tell. I don't want you to get your feelings hurt on that, Bert, because we're going to need your help in talking about this topic, because there are some legal considerations in particular that I think our audience also needs to be aware of. So I'd like to kind of blend, the the awareness and the support and the consciousness centered around mental health crisis and issues today in the workplace and the legal complications with that as well. In addition to that, then just the right things that we should be doing to help people who find themselves in need. So it's going to be a combination of conversation. So don't you go too far away, Bert. We want to keep you involved.
I will be here.
Here's the poll question for today. Which of the following best reflects fairness in the workplace? And I want you to think about this question in the context of fairness as it relates to mental health and disabilities in the workplace, equal opportunity and advancement, consistent application of policies, pay equality or equity, objective performance reviews, psychological safe environment, or other. And if you have some others, just put those into the chat and we'll be sure to get those out for everyone to see. All right. So if you do have questions for Linea or myself, even Bert, every now and then he'll get a question or two. Go ahead and put those into the chat. We'll get those, and let's get right into it. So Linea, I know that you have your own business, Thrive Shift. I know it's a woman and disability owned business. Tell us a little bit about Thrive Shift and how people can find more information about your organization. Let's start right there.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Thrive Shift is a woman and disability owned business. I am the sole owner. So being a woman and a person with a disability, I live with bipolar disorder, anxiety, and in recovery from an eating disorder. So I'm able to really speak to those as someone with lived experience, which I think is a really powerful piece of that. The Thrive Shift works on workplace mental health and really helping start conversations around it. When I pack it into one, I think that's what it really comes down to. How do we have conversations around mental health and mental health awareness?
Absolutely. And how can they find Thrive Shift?
LineaJohnson.com. Just my first and last name, pretty easy. I do a lot of public speaking and writing, and then also I do consulting specifically with businesses.
Yeah. And I can tell you, my only and first exposure was in the public speaking environment, and fantastic, standing ovation. She just did a great job. So if anyone does ever find that need, feel free to reach out to her. I know you won't be let down by that. All right. So one of the things that I do remember about the speech that you gave was you talked about, I think it was the three C's. What did that tell us more about what the three C's were, if I have that right, from your presentation?
Absolutely. So the three C's I like to talk about are compassion, curiosity, and courage. And for me, compassion gets into empathy, psychological safety. Curiosity is active listening, really trying to get to know people and their stories, remembering everyone has their own story. And courage is that piece that if you feel safe, being courageously vulnerable. And that's something that for me, I've always been very open about my mental health condition, but that's something that even if you just let people know a little bit about yourself, it's very helpful.
Yeah. Which to me, I think that's really hard to do, right? It's if so I'll give you a perfect example, and this wasn't the plan. I mean, here you stand, you look at me, I got this nice little gash on my forehead. You can see it. People come up and they have empathy for that, or they have curiosity, and they want to ask about it. Up into just the other day, 2 days ago, I was walking out of our conference that we had in Peoria, and I was on my phone and I was walking, and a lady who I did not know goes, "Oh, is that how you got the bump on your head?" Right? And she was being friendly and nice about it, wasn't insulting at all, but because I wasn't paying attention. So she could see it, and it makes sense. Often with mental illness, we don't see it. And we don't know about. So it's so silent, and all of us. And I remember you asked us to show a sign of hands. Who in the room knows someone, a family member, a friend, a neighbor, or even themselves that struggle with some form of mental illness? And every single person in the room raised their hand. And that right there starts to bring the walls down. But again, these are not illnesses that we can see. So how do we help bring this into the workplace and make it more okay or accommodating in the workplace? And I can tell you, then I want to get into some conversation with you, Bert, and how do we accommodate and what does the law expect us to do? But first, Lanique, if you can kick us off with how do we make it more okay to talk about in the workplace?
Talking about it is tricky. I've been doing this since around 2010, 2008, and I've seen a lot of great changes. We are talking about it more, but there is still a lot of stigma and just discrimination. I like to use that word because really, even when it comes to legal, that's what it comes down to. A lot of people aren't disclosing and getting the accommodations they need because of stigma and discrimination. But to change that, one of the things that we can do is just start normalizing it. Be courageous in just talking about it as something that's normal. You talked about people in the audience raising their hand. I do that every time I speak, and there's never an audience that I've had where everyone didn't raise their hand. Everyone is touched by this, whether it's themselves or a family member, someone they care about. And I think it's just so important to just start normalizing the conversation. Going beyond that, businesses can have campaigns that are lasting mental health campaigns. We've seen in the research that, people like perks, but that's not really where the big work happens. If you actually bake it into your culture, you think about how you can create this space that mental health is normalized.
Yeah. And I think when we don't see it, it's not always a reminder to us. So probably there's some element of, like you say, making it more of a campaign or just part of your culture to where just because we don't see it doesn't mean it's there. Sometimes it's like a safety hazard in and of itself. You don't see the safety hazard till it actually causes you a problem, but you're constantly campaigning in and around safety. Now, Bert, I just going to reflect on my career, and I sure hope some of the things I say people understand. I've been working quite a long time. And in working over the years back into the late 80s through today, times are very different. I mean, we did not talk about or accept mental health as any form of workplace reasonable accommodations that were needed to be made. It didn't fit in the workplace, particularly back then. And I had a mother who suffered from mental health her entire life. And it impacted her ability to maintain a job in a consistent way, and so forth. So I know over the years, without a doubt, for some individuals that abused what we would call abused attendance program or had outburst at work or different scenarios that today may have qualified for some mental health accommodations probably ended up being terminated, right? So maybe they couldn't come to work and they had a point system, they had too many points and they were either stressed or whatever their scenario was. I don't know because we didn't talk about it. Then they would get, to the end of the line and then they get terminated. Now at the same time, people would come to work and they would say, "Hey, I have cancer and I have to receive treatment, or I have a disability, physical disability," and we would have accommodations physically made in the workplace where we spend lots of money to, have bathrooms enlarged so people can get in with wheelchairs. And this is before, ADA and some of the rules there. And we do lots of things to help people we know who are sick with a physical disability that we can see. Where does this line come together for people who have to make or should make or shouldn't make, I don't know, you tell me, the same accommodations for mental disability as they would for a physical disability? I think that's where the area gets really gray and hard to interpret.
Yeah, so I think you're going back into history a little bit and talking about, you've been in the workplace a long
Well,
time.
that was kind of my confession. I feel a little
Yeah,
better now that I've said that. Okay.
good, good.
And I think sometimes if you just say it, Lene's given me some courage here. I feel a little bit better. I did that without consciousness of an awareness to the knowledge I have today.
Well, that's good. I think a little history is in order because it seems like for everybody who's well, most people who are in the workplace these days that the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, has been around forever, and it hasn't. It was signed into law in 1990, so it's been around for what by my quick math, that's 34 years, and so most people who are in the workplace today, not everyone, but the majority of workers, the Gen Z, the millennials, I forgot what our
Many
current
of the Gen
generation is.
Xers, yeah,
Yeah, the Gen Xers, in whatever our current what's the current generation we're in? Is that Gen Z?
Alpha,
Alpha.
yeah,
Thank you. All right. So,
newest,
you know,
yeah.
they weren't in the workplace when the ADA didn't exist, and so the ADA really did reshape sort of the workplace landscape and put a federal focus on accommodations in the workplace. I think that with a physical disability, it's very tangible. It's largely easy to see, not always, but for the most part, when somebody has a physical disability, it's easy to see. We've been dealing with the ADA for 34 years now, and the ADA, when it was enacted, was definitely focused on physical disabilities. It was not focused on the mental disabilities. This has been something that's been uh, uh, come to the forefront, really, I would say probably in the last 10 to 15 years is the mental disabilities. And when the ADA Amendment Act was passed several years ago, I think that the ADA definitely shifted. I joke and say that ADA, the ADA Amendments Act, stands for Assume Disability and Always Accommodate, and it made the
Mhm.
threshold a lot easier for people to overcome to be classified as disabled under the law. And so, realistically, the obligation with respect to a mental disability and a physical disability is the same. The employer needs to take that into account and offer a reasonable accommodation. And so long as the accommodation does not constitute an undue hardship on the employer, then the employer needs to accommodate. Now, one thing that you mentioned, though, Phil, is that you were talking about your mom and other people who because of a mental disability aren't able to satisfy certain requirements of the job. Remember that the standard under the ADA is that the person needs to be able to perform the essential functions of their position either with or without a reasonable accommodation. And so that's where that interactive process becomes critical, interacting with the employee to determine what, if anything, the employer can do to reasonably accommodate the employee. And so that all of that's a really long way of saying that we as the employer have an obligation to engage in that interactive process with the employee. It does not matter if it's a physical disability or a mental disability, the same standard applies.
Yeah. So, Lenny, I know that you work with, I believe it's the ADA, or you've done some work in this space.
I
Um,
have, yeah.
and I know you also told some amazing stories about your working experience and some of the accommodations that were made that allowed you to be very productive in the roles that you had. How, I think the difficult part is how do we start talking about this in the workplace? Because all the wonderful professionals I work with, and it's thousands of them around the country, I don't know that I've ever met one individual that if they knew and they were aware that they wouldn't accommodate to their best of their abilities, but they don't always know and they're not aware. So how do we bring this accommodation, this conversation to life in the workplace so that we even have a chance to accommodate and help someone? Because we're often suppressing the, the conversation because it's not comfortable yet.
Absolutely. And I think that one of the important things when it comes to the ADA, and we're very lucky to have it, but you like mentioned earlier, we have to disclose. And if we are in a space where people don't feel safe talking about mental health, they don't feel safe talking, sharing that and disclosing, they can't qualify to get those accommodations. They can't get that support. And so I don't know if universal design or the curb cut effect. Essentially, with the curb cut, when it came to disabilities, when we developed this for physical disabilities, in the end, mothers with strollers or people, it helps everybody. And so if you think about it with mental health, if we create this culture where people feel safe, where we have practical ways of supporting people, then it helps everyone. And so for me, if we think about it going beyond just helping mental health, but we build in active listening. We have managers who know how to support their team and remember that everyone has individual strengths. Ask those questions about, have those difficult conversations to know why, you're struggling here. How can I help you? Whether it's an accommodation or a different way of just supporting someone. I think that it's essential to just build that in, whether the ADA exists or not. That does take us having the harder conversations and knowing how to support our teams, getting in a state that people feel comfortable, and remembering also the diversity piece, because I, as a white woman, it might be easier for me to disclose than someone else that has a very different experience. And so we have to remember that piece as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really important element. Bert, I see you shaking your head. Is there something you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, you could see me chomping at the bit over here, Phil. I appreciate that. So yeah,
That's why we like to give you your segment up front, and we kind of let you get all your words out, and then we can go on and have a great show.
yeah, I think that Linea brought up a really important piece here, and that is, she's talking about having a safe space in the workplace in order to feel comfortable to share things about the disability. And I'm going to give you a very, very complex legal phrase here. So be careful, Phil. I know you get mad
Here
when
it
I throw out
comes.
these big words and these big phrases, legal jargon. I'm going to give you one right now, and it is magic words. Can you get your hands around that? Magic words?
Is that like magic? Like now you see me, now you don't? The Magic
Uh,
Man? Yeah.
Well, the phrase that many of the court cases often repeat in their decisions is that under the ADA, employees do not need to use any quote unquote magic words to put their employer on notice that they need some sort of an accommodation. They don't need to actually even refer to the ADA. It is, in other words, that means it's really the employer's obligation to recognize when an employee is struggling and when they might need some sort of an accommodation under the ADA. And so that really does get to Linea's point that when you're dealing with a mental illness, mental disability, it's very, very difficult to see. It's not nearly as tangible as the physical disability in most cases. And so it's harder on the employer to recognize when an employee is suffering from some sort of mental health condition. And again, that gets to Linea's point that the employee needs to feel comfortable being able to talk about that in the workplace, either with their supervisor or with human resources, so that the employer can then go down the interactive process road and satisfy their not only their legal obligation, but satisfy their duty that they owe to the employee.
All right. Hey, Nick, how's the poll results coming? I don't want to miss those and maybe get a chance to peek at the poll results.
Yeah, the poll question here, we have about 42.9% on the psychologically safe environment as the top reason, and then you have pay equity behind that, and then we go to another couple there. So I'd like to continue to hear your answers.
All right, we'll continue to see what response.
All right. Well, Phil's gone. He's departed the program. So you and I can still talk and carry on for a few minutes while maybe Phil tries to rejoin here. So what do you suggest for individuals in the workplace when they are suffering from some sort of mental health issue? How do you suggest they engage with their employer?
I think that one of the things that we can do to support those individuals before they even have to is provide education. I think a lot of folks that are dealing with mental health, they don't know that they have these rights. They don't know that they, you know, they might know that not know that they should even talk to, or that they have the opportunity to talk to their manager and ask for support. So providing that overall education around mental health, like we were talking, having a campaign or something where we're building awareness, having an employee, either an EAP or some kind of resource group where they can talk to other folks, having benefits that allow them to know that they're supported from the start. They know that they're part of that, and going beyond benefits, having a manager that is willing to like ask them around these things. I love OC Tanner has a new thing about practical empathy. And I think there's a lot around like this touchy feely mental health piece, but there's practical actions in how we can listen, how we can take action to show that we can build trust.
All right.
You
Well,
know,
I think that's great. And what do you suggest from the perspective of management? How would you suggest the company goes about uh, implementing programs, or what types of programs they can implement to educate not just the individuals who might be suffering from the mental disability, but the managers and supervisors, so that they can develop that empathy? And I do see Phil's back with us, so real
yeah,
quick. So
sorry
if you
about
can.
that. Yeah, go right ahead. Keep going.
Yeah, one of the great things that I like to share is the Surgeon General's framework. They have 5 key things of protection from harm, connection, community, work-life harmony, mattering at work, and opportunity for growth. Within those, there are different frameworks that you can follow and develop it. They have a really great resource that I believe we can share out. But helping people know that they have safety, that they have equal pay, that they have learning opportunities, they have opportunities. It's a lot of the basic things that we use to create to help employees know that they're valued, have autonomy, flexibility, meaning, all of those pieces that we can build into our culture and our policies and strategies.
One of the things that I'm impressed with is our newest generation, Gen Z, that's in the workplace, and their awareness and consciousness to mental health compared to the workplace that I grew up in originally was, just tough it out. That that's what you were expected to do. And we definitely weren't expected to ever really talk about our feelings or anything that might be affecting us. Do you see or recognize a difference in the generations or the trends? Can you talk a little bit about how you see this changing or improving, hopefully, in the workplace?
I am so excited to see that they're talking about it and open. I think that they're really able to challenge us. Even I'm a millennial, and even for me, that the idea of pseudo productivity, where we feel like we have to always be on and check our email every moment of the day, Gen Z is saying, well, why? And we're not getting paid for these hours, or, this is in the job description. I'm doing my job description. If I'm not getting supported to do the rest, why do I have to bend over backwards? So they have these really great boundaries, and they're able to support their mental health and their physical health as a priority, which I think a lot of us, even millennials onward, we didn't do that. I think it's a great challenge for all of us.
Yeah. I know that and I'm trying to drive and keep the conversation because I could talk to you all day about this topic. But I know our listeners are often challenged with leading organizations in the most appropriate way. And in that case, they have different generations and different mindsets. And there is that mindset of still like, look, leave that at home. That's not always possible to leave that at home. And there's also the difference of chronic versus acute illnesses that we're struggling with. What what would be some advice? And it's kind of piggyback on Bert's question here. What's some advice for all leaders to be aware of, or maybe how to start talking about that in the boardroom so that it can then flow down into an organization?
I think that you can really look at your trends that you're seeing around engagement, around people leaving, around the usage of benefits. Ask yourself the hard questions around, do we know why people aren't asking for accommodations? Do we know why people are leaving? And really get to the heart of this culture piece. Do we talk about empathy, but we're not actually showing it or acting it? Do we talk about having psychological safety, but our employees might not think that we do, and us in leadership positions do? I think that really, when you're in that leadership role, ask yourself the hard questions and then actually think, like, give yourself the hard answers. It's going to be uncomfortable, but I think that's where you have to just keep challenging yourself. And I'm trained in change management as well. So for me, this is all part of that piece of the beginnings of change management and doing good internal communications around it. It starts with us asking these questions.
Absolutely. The other thing I was telling some younger employees about just the other day is that, when I grew up, we didn't have the words work-life balance didn't exist, right? They existed individually, but not collectively as a statement. And the way that you were given your mental health break was you could take your 1 week of vacation. And that's what you were expected to do, and go to work every day and be on time and stay to the end. And if they needed you to stay longer, then you stayed longer, period. No questions asked, no matter what it was interfering. And we live in a very different work environment today that you would think helps accommodate the spectrum of mental illness or physical illness, but it doesn't. You shared a wonderful story about some of the things that your employer allowed you to do when you were on stage. Can you just shed a little bit of light on that, and maybe share then how that really impacted you, your opinion for that employer, and the additional effort that you made? It was a great story, and I think it was really impactful. I'd like to maybe share that as we work towards our close here.
Absolutely. So, as someone with lived experience of mental illness, I have used accommodations many times. I'm trying to remember the exact story, but one of the things that has been helpful to me, I had to step out. I was not doing my best work. I was really struggling, and I had to step out to do an intensive outpatient program for my eating disorder. And my employer really helped work with me to figure out how I can have that backup of someone to support me while I'm gone, and to also continue to have the conversation around when I'm ready to do more work or when I need to step back a little bit. So some of the accommodations for me were not just having that time that I could take from medical appointments, but also, do I need to adjust my schedule? Are there things that I need to do that might help my memory issues, or any of those pieces? That's been really helpful for me.
Yeah, and those accommodations I know are expected probably under ADA in today's world. Lenny, I can't thank you enough. Is there any last closings? Again, you shared your website. Anything else that you would share with the audience on how they can reach you if they wanted to work with you or learn more?
Absolutely. So lineajohnson.com. I also have a newsletter that I just shared out, for example, the mental health at work resources basics. So you can find my newsletter. I also have a book that I wrote of my own personal story called Perfect Chaos. That's a memoir around my story with bipolar.
Perfect. I love it. I love the title, Perfect Chaos. It's awesome. Bert, thank you as always. Lenny, it's wonderful to reconnect with you, and I look forward to working more with you in the future. And if anyone does ever need any help, this is a good way to go out and be good to someone and reach out and extend a hand and be a good listener first, and then point them in the direction to get the help that they might need, like you would for any other physical illness. Until then, we'll be back next week at 7:30 Central Time. And like we always say, go out and be good to someone. Bye-bye.
Thank you once again for tuning in to This Week at Work. If you enjoy the show, please share it with your colleagues. Forward our invites. Share the link, aimea.org/thisweekatwork, or follow or subscribe wherever you get your news and entertainment. LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, we're everywhere you are. Don't forget you can be part of the show. Send your questions and comments anytime to info@thisweek.work. We'll see you next week, 7:30 a.m. Central Time, when we discuss what's happening this week at work.